Ladies and gentlemen, we all chase happiness. We chase it in success, in relationships, in comfort, in recognition, and in circumstances we hope will finally make us feel complete. Yet despite all our efforts, many of us live with a quiet heaviness, a subtle dissatisfaction, a sense that something is missing. The true cause of this unhappiness is not always obvious, because it does not come from the world outside. It comes from the world within. The hidden cause of unhappiness is resistance. Resistance to what is, resistance to who we are, resistance to the feelings we carry, and resistance to the realities we cannot change. Life moves, but we hold on. Life shifts, but we cling to how it used to be. Life challenges us, but we insist it should not. This silent tug of war between reality and our expectations creates tension, and that tension becomes the source of our suffering. Think of how often unhappiness begins not with an event, but with the story we build around it. Someone speaks to us sharply, and instead of letting the moment pass, we replay it, we analyze it, we add meaning to it. A plan falls apart, and rather than adapt, we fight the disappointment with frustration and blame. Emotions rise within us, sadness, fear, anger, and instead of allowing them to move through, we resist them, bury them, or judge ourselves for feeling them. The event is small, but the resistance is large, and it is that resistance that becomes unhappiness. We also suffer because we believe our thoughts without question. The mind whispers, "You're not enough," and we accept it. It tells us things should be different, and we obey it. It convinces us that happiness is somewhere else, in the next achievement, in another person, in a future moment, and we spend our lives chasing illusions. But the truth is simple and often uncomfortable. As long as we are at war with ourselves, no external success can save us from unhappiness. Unhappiness grows when we cling too tightly. Cling to our expectations, cling to our identity, cling to control. We cling to the idea of how life must be, and in doing so, we reject the life that is actually unfolding. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means releasing the tight grip that suffocates our peace. It means making space for clarity, acceptance, and growth. It means trusting that life can be lived without constant internal resistance. Awareness is the turning point. The moment you become aware of your thoughts, instead of blindly believing them, unhappiness loses its grip. The moment you allow emotions to exist without trying to suppress them, they soften. The moment you stop forcing life to fit your expectations, you begin to experience it as it is, not as your fear or frustration paints it. Clarity is what dismantles the hidden cause of suffering. We cannot stop challenges from coming. We cannot stop emotions from rising. We cannot stop life from being unpredictable, but we can stop feeding unhappiness with resistance, judgment, and fear. The more aware we become, the more we see that peace is not the absence of pain, but the absence of struggle against it. Happiness is not something we chase, it is what remains when we stop fighting ourselves. So if you want to free yourself from unhappiness, begin by looking inward. Not to criticize, not to fix, but simply to see. See the thoughts that create tension. See the expectations that imprison you. See the emotions you resist. And see the possibility that life becomes lighter the moment you stop pushing against what is already here. The hidden cause of unhappiness is not life itself. It is the way we meet life. Change that, and everything changes. Clarity begins with awareness, and awareness is the quiet, steady light that allows us to finally see the truth of our inner world. Most people move through life on autopilot, reacting to situations without ever understanding the forces at work beneath the surface. Thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, but without awareness, we mistake these temporary movements for our identity. We assume we are angry rather than noticing that anger has appeared. We assume we are stressed rather than observing that stress is passing through. This confusion is the root of much unnecessary suffering, because whatever we cannot see clearly, we cannot change. Awareness is the first step toward clarity, because it reveals what was previously hidden. Imagine a dark room filled with objects scattered everywhere. You walk through it, bumping into things, getting hurt, feeling frustrated, and believing the room is dangerous. But when you turn on a light, nothing in the room changes except your ability to navigate it. The obstacles were always there, but with awareness, they no longer control you. In the same way, the mind is full of memories, beliefs, fears, assumptions, and habits that have accumulated over the years. Without awareness, we trip over them repeatedly. With awareness, we finally see where our suffering comes from. Awareness is not about judging or fixing. It is simply about seeing. Most people misunderstand awareness as something active, as if they must do something extraordinary to achieve it. But awareness is actually the opposite of effort. It is the natural ability to notice what is happening inside and around you without interference. When you observe your breath, you become aware. When you notice tension in your shoulders, you become aware. When you recognize that a thought is just a thought, not a command, you are practicing awareness. This clarity changes everything. When you are aware of your emotions, you no longer drown in them. You can watch anger arise, peak, and fade without acting impulsively. You can feel fear without running from it. You can see sadness without being consumed by it. Awareness gives you the space between stimulus and response, and in that space, freedom exists. Life still presents challenges, but you no longer react blindly. Instead, you respond with understanding, patience, and clarity. Awareness also reveals the subtle patterns that shape your life. You begin to notice how certain thoughts trigger certain emotions, how certain situations activate old wounds, and how certain habits are rooted in fear or avoidance. You might discover that you always rush when you feel uncertain, or that you become defensive when you feel unappreciated. These patterns operate unconsciously until awareness brings them into the light. Once they are seen, they lose their power. You no longer blame circumstances or other people for your inner turmoil, because you understand where it truly comes from. Clarity through awareness also dissolves illusions. Much of human suffering comes from misperceptions. Believing you must always be strong, thinking others must approve of you, imagining that success will erase insecurity, or assuming that life should unfold according to your expectations. These illusions only survive in darkness. When you observe them with awareness, you see their emptiness. You recognize that many of your assumptions were inherited from family, society, or past experiences, not chosen consciously. With awareness, you begin to choose what truly serves your well-being. Awareness deepens your connection to the present moment. The mind often lives in the past or future, replaying old conversations or imagining problems that have not yet occurred. This mental wandering creates confusion and stress because you are not actually experiencing life. You are experiencing your thoughts about life. Awareness brings you back to the reality unfolding right now. When you breathe consciously, listen fully, or feel the ground beneath your feet, your attention returns to the present. In the present, clarity is natural because there is no conflict between what is happening and what the mind wishes were happening. Through awareness, you also develop a compassionate understanding of yourself. Instead of judging your emotions or criticizing your thoughts, you simply notice them. This gentle observing dissolves inner resistance. You stop fighting yourself. You stop trying to be perfect. You stop running from your imperfections. Awareness makes room for acceptance, and acceptance is the soil in which true transformation grows. Clarity begins with awareness because awareness is the foundation of inner mastery. Without it, you repeat the same patterns endlessly, mistaking reaction for choice and confusion for reality. With it, you see yourself honestly, respond wisely, and navigate life with openness and understanding. Resistance creates tension, and this tension becomes one of the most consistent yet invisible sources of suffering in our lives. Resistance often appears so subtly that we do not even recognize it as the cause of our discomfort. It can take the form of rejecting an emotion we do not want to feel, fighting against a situation we cannot change, avoiding a truth we are afraid to face, or clinging to expectations that reality refuses to fulfill. Whenever we push against what is, we create an internal friction that tightens the mind, hardens the heart, and exhausts the body. This is the essence of tension, the struggle between reality and our refusal to accept it. Resistance is born from the belief that things should be different from how they are. When the mind insists that life must follow a specific script, any deviation becomes a threat. A small inconvenience transforms into irritation, a moment of uncertainty becomes anxiety, and a simple challenge feels overwhelming. It is not the situation itself that creates tension, but the internal protest against it. For example, pain is a natural sensation, but resisting pain by thinking, "This should not be happening to me," magnifies it. Delays happen in life, but resisting them by demanding, "Why is this taking so long?" creates frustration. Emotions arise within us, but resisting them by declaring, "I shouldn't feel this way," adds shame and confusion. This resistance disconnects us from reality. Instead of engaging with the present moment, the mind battles against it. That battle consumes a tremendous amount of energy. Even when nothing dramatic is happening on the outside, an internal storm brews, because the mind is arguing with what already exists. Life becomes heavier not because the circumstances are unbearable, but because we carry the weight of our resistance to them. Tension builds silently, accumulating in the body as tightness, in the breath as shallowness, and in the mind as restlessness. The more we resist, the more reactive we become. Resistance narrows our perception, making problems appear larger and options seem fewer. A person who resists uncertainty becomes anxious at every unexpected change. Someone who resists criticism becomes defensive even when no attack is present. A person who resists vulnerability becomes emotionally rigid, unable to connect deeply with others. The tension created by resistance forms rigid patterns, trapping us in repetitive cycles of behavior that feel impossible to escape. Resistance also blocks emotional flow. Emotions are meant to move through us like waves, rising, cresting, and falling. When we resist them, we interrupt this natural movement. The emotion becomes stuck, lingering in the mind and body far longer than it needs to. Anger resisted becomes resentment. Sadness resisted becomes numbness. Fear resisted becomes panic. Each of these transformations creates deeper tension, because the emotion has not been allowed to complete its cycle. What could have passed naturally becomes an emotional, not tightened by our refusal to feel. Furthermore, resistance prevents growth. Challenges, discomfort, and uncertainty are part of life's natural process of refinement. They are opportunities for development, strengthening, and learning. But when we resist them, we close the door to these possibilities. We avoid difficult conversations, hide from responsibilities, or cling to comfort zones. This avoidance feels safe in the short term, but the long-term cost is stagnation. The tension that comes from resisting growth becomes a constant background weight, an unspoken knowing that we are living below our potential. In relationships, resistance creates distance. When we resist listening because we want to be right, communication breaks down. When we resist forgiving because we cling to past pain, connection weakens. When we resist being honest because we fear vulnerability, trust erodes. The tension created in the dynamic becomes palpable, shaping interactions even when no words are spoken. Over time, this unspoken tension accumulates and becomes the underlying tone of the relationship. On a deeper level, resistance often arises from fear. The fear of losing control, fear of discomfort, fear of uncertainty, or fear of facing parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. The mind believes that by resisting, it can protect us, but this protection is an illusion. Instead of shielding us, resistance keeps us stuck. What we fear grows stronger when we fight against it rather than understanding it. When we recognize how resistance creates tension, we begin to see the possibility of a different way of being. The opposite of resistance is not passive surrender, but a conscious acceptance of reality as it is. Acceptance softens tension, not by eliminating challenges, but by removing the internal struggle that amplifies them. It allows emotions to flow, conversations to deepen, learning to occur, and life to move with greater ease. Through awareness of resistance, the tension it creates becomes a guide, pointing us toward the parts of ourselves and our lives that are asking for understanding rather than battle. Your inner world shapes your outer world, and this truth becomes clearer the more closely you examine the relationship between thoughts, emotions, perceptions, and the life you experience. Every person carries an invisible landscape within them, a landscape made of beliefs, expectations, memories, values, interpretations, and habitual patterns of thought. This inner landscape determines how we interpret events, how we respond to challenges, how we relate to others, and ultimately, how we shape the world around us. Two people can stand in the same situation and have completely different experiences, not because of the external conditions, but because of the internal ones. It is the inner world that gives every moment its meaning. Most of what we perceive is filtered through the mind. This filter influences what we notice, what we ignore, and how we evaluate what we see. If a person holds a belief that the world is hostile, even neutral situations will appear threatening. If someone believes they are capable and worthy, challenges become opportunities instead of obstacles. This is not about denying reality or pretending everything is positive. It is about recognizing that the mind is the lens through which reality is interpreted. When the lens is clear, the world appears more manageable. When it is clouded by fear, doubt, or anger, the world becomes heavy and confusing. The emotional world functions similarly. Emotions influence perception far more than we often acknowledge. A joyful mind sees possibilities, an anxious mind sees dangers. When you feel peaceful, small inconveniences do not disturb you. When you feel stressed, even minor issues seem overwhelming. The outer world has not changed. Your inner state has. This inner state colors every interaction, every decision, and every experience. Over time, these accumulated experiences shape the direction of your life. In this way, the inner world silently constructs the outer world piece by piece. Your inner dialogue also plays a significant role. The way you speak to yourself determines what you believe you can achieve. A person who constantly tells themselves, "I can't," or "I'm not enough," limits their own potential before taking a single step. Their outer world shrinks to match the boundaries created by their inner voice. In contrast, a person who cultivates self-trust expands their world. They take risks, pursue what matters, and approach life with openness instead of fear. The outer achievements are not the cause of inner confidence. The inner confidence is the cause of the outer achievements. Relationships are another clear example of how the inner world shapes the outer one. If someone carries unresolved anger or old wounds, they may misinterpret others' intentions, become defensive, or push people away without realizing it. They may believe others are cold or unkind, but in reality, they are viewing the relationship through the emotional residue of their inner world. When the inner world becomes calmer and more balanced, communication improves, compassion deepens, and relationships feel more authentic. The behavior of others may not change, but the way one perceives and responds to them does. Even the goals you pursue and the choices you make originate from within. A mind filled with fear seeks comfort and predictability. A mind filled with curiosity seeks growth. A mind filled with doubt hesitates. A mind filled with purpose acts with clarity. Because of this, two people with the same opportunities will create completely different lives depending on what their inner world supports. The outer life becomes a reflection of the inner narrative, whether that narrative is empowering or limiting. The inner world also shapes how you handle adversity. Difficulties are inevitable, but suffering is shaped by interpretation. When the inner world is grounded, challenges become teachers. When the inner world is unstable, challenges become threats. The same storm can strengthen one person and break another, not because of its force, but because of the internal structure it encounters. This is why cultivating inner resilience, awareness, and emotional balance becomes essential. Without them, life feels like a series of unpredictable assaults. With them, life becomes a series of experiences to navigate with wisdom. Creativity, problem solving, and decision-making are also influenced by the inner world. A tense, chaotic mind struggles to see solutions, while a calm, organized mind finds clarity even in complexity. The ability to think clearly does not come from external calm, but from internal steadiness. When the inner world is harmonious, the outer world feels more manageable, regardless of circumstances. The greatest breakthroughs often come not from external brainstorming, but from moments of inner stillness, where the mind becomes open and receptive. Ultimately, the outer world becomes a mirror. It reflects back the beliefs we hold, the emotions we carry, and the thoughts we repeatedly entertain. If the inner world is filled with gratitude, the outer world reveals abundance. If it is filled with fear, the outer world reveals threats. If it is filled with confusion, the outer world reveals obstacles. By tending to the inner world, clearing old patterns, cultivating understanding, and nurturing emotional clarity, the outer world gradually shifts to reflect a more peaceful and empowered state of being. Letting go is a form of strength, though many people misunderstand it as a sign of weakness or defeat. The truth is that it takes far more courage to release something than to cling to it. Holding on often comes from fear of change, fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, or fear of feeling vulnerable. Letting go, in contrast, requires trust. Trust in oneself, trust in the flow of life, and trust that something new can grow in the space created by release. Strength is not found in tightening your grip, but in opening your hand. Letting go begins with acknowledging that not everything is meant to stay. People change, situations shift, emotions evolve, and life moves forward whether we resist it or not. The attempt to freeze reality in a form that feels comfortable only creates suffering. When you cling to what is no longer aligned with who you are becoming, you block your own growth. Letting go means recognizing when something has fulfilled its purpose and allowing it to return to its natural place in your life's journey. One of the most difficult things to let go of is the past. Memories, regrets, old hurts, and unresolved conversations can occupy a tremendous amount of mental and emotional space. When you repeatedly replay what cannot be changed, you trap yourself in a cycle of self-inflicted pain. Letting go of the past does not mean erasing it or pretending it never happened. It means accepting that what happened cannot be altered and choosing not to let it define the present. This acceptance is a quiet, powerful form of strength that frees you from the weight of what can no longer serve you. Expectations are another source of attachment that often leads to disappointment. We create detailed internal pictures of how life should unfold, how people should behave, and who we ourselves should be. When reality contradicts these imagined scenarios, tension arises. The strength of letting go in this context involves releasing the rigid demands we place on circumstances and allowing life to unfold in its own way. This flexibility does not diminish ambition or intention. It simply removes unnecessary suffering caused by trying to control what is beyond control. Letting go also applies to emotions. Many people resist difficult emotions, trying to suppress anger, deny sadness, or escape fear. Yet resisting emotions only strengthens them, causing them to linger. When you let go of the need to control or hide your feelings, they are able to move through you naturally, like waves passing through the ocean. Allowing yourself to feel fully, without judgment, without resistance, is one of the strongest acts of self-trust. It demonstrates that you believe in your own capacity to face and survive inner storms. Relationships provide another powerful lesson in letting go. Sometimes we hold on to people not because they are good for us, but because we fear what life will feel like without them. We cling to familiar pain rather than risk the uncertainty of change. Letting go of a relationship that is unhealthy, unbalanced, or no longer supportive requires immense inner strength. It asks you to believe that your own well-being matters, that you deserve peace, and that new connections will come when you create space for them. It also asks you to release the need to control the actions, emotions, or choices of others. You cannot make someone stay, change, love differently, or understand you the way you wish. Letting go honors both your path and theirs. Self-images and identities are often the hardest to release. Over time, people adopt roles: the responsible one, the strong one, the helper, the perfectionist, the achiever. These identities may have served a purpose once, but they can become cages. Letting go of outdated versions of yourself requires strength, because it invites vulnerability. It means stepping into the unknown and allowing yourself to evolve. Growth demands that you shed old skins. Just as nature continually teaches trees let go of leaves, snakes let go of their old skins, and rivers let go of obstacles by flowing around them. Life itself progresses through cycles of release. Letting go is also an act of faith in your inner resilience. When you release something, you risk feeling empty for a while. Strength shows itself in your ability to sit with that emptiness without rushing to fill it with distractions or replacements. In this space of release, clarity emerges. You discover what truly matters, what is truly yours, and what you are carrying only out of habit. This clarity allows you to act from wisdom rather than fear. Ultimately, letting go is not about losing. It is about creating space for what aligns with who you are becoming. It is about recognizing that holding on tightly often closes more doors than it opens. When you let go, you choose courage over comfort, truth over illusion, and growth over stagnation. This quiet, steady, inward strength becomes the foundation for a more peaceful and authentic life. Pain is natural, unhappiness is optional, and understanding the distinction between the two offers a profound shift in how we live. Pain is an inevitable part of the human experience. It comes in many forms: physical discomfort, emotional wounds, disappointment, loss, failure, and unexpected challenges. No one moves through life untouched by pain. It is woven into the fabric of growth, change, and vulnerability. Pain signals when something needs attention, invites us to learn, and often serves as a catalyst for transformation. Unhappiness, however, is not the pain itself but the mental story, resistance, and interpretation surrounding it. Unhappiness arises when the mind clings, protests, exaggerates, or fears what pain represents. When pain appears, it is usually simple: a feeling of sadness, a moment of fear, a sting of rejection, or a physical sensation of discomfort. But the mind rarely leaves pain as it is. Instead, it adds layers: judgment, meaning, assumptions, and projections. Sadness becomes, "This shouldn't be happening." Fear becomes, "I can't handle this." Failure becomes, "I'm not good enough." These added layers transform pure pain into extended unhappiness. Pain is the event. Unhappiness is the narrative we create around it. This separation becomes clearer when observing that different people respond to the same painful experience in drastically different ways. One person encounters a setback and becomes deeply discouraged, viewing it as proof of inadequacy. Another experiences the same setback but sees it as temporary, a challenge to overcome. The experience is identical, but the inner interpretation differs. It is the interpretation, not the event, that determines the level of unhappiness. This shows how much power lies within the mind, and how much influence we have over our emotional world. Once we learn to recognize the difference between the raw sensation of pain and the suffering created by thought. Pain is a visitor that naturally rises and falls, but unhappiness lingers because the mind holds on to it. When you resist pain, you feed unhappiness. Resistance sounds like, "I should be over this by now," "This isn't fair," or "Why me?" These thoughts create friction and prolong the emotional storm. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows pain to move through you without additional burden. Accepting pain does not mean enjoying it or wanting it. It simply means allowing the reality of the moment without adding unnecessary mental struggle. In this acceptance, pain loses its power to turn into chronic unhappiness. Another way pain transforms into unhappiness is through identification. When someone feels emotional pain, they often begin to believe that the emotion defines who they are. For instance, feeling lonely becomes, "I am alone." Feeling afraid becomes, "I am weak." Feeling rejected becomes, "I am unworthy." This identification deepens unhappiness because it turns a temporary emotion into a statement of identity. When you learn to see emotions as passing experiences rather than personal definitions, you break the cycle that transforms momentary pain into lasting unhappiness. The body is naturally designed to process pain. It knows how to heal wounds, calm nerves, and restore balance. The mind, however, often interrupts this process by obsessing over the feeling, replaying the cause, or imagining future scenarios. This mental interference traps pain in place. When you allow the body and emotions to process naturally, without adding mental resistance, pain runs its natural course. It rises, peaks, and eventually softens. This is why practices like mindfulness, presence, and breathwork are powerful. They help you observe the pain without becoming entangled in the narrative around it. Perspective also plays a vital role. Pain often reveals strength, resilience, and clarity that remain hidden during comfort. Challenges refine character, deepen empathy, and expand understanding. Pain becomes a teacher when you approach it with openness rather than fear. This does not mean seeking pain, but rather recognizing that it can carry insights that comfort cannot. When pain is seen as part of the human experience rather than a threat to be avoided at all costs, it becomes less frightening and less likely to turn into unhappiness. Another essential aspect is impermanence. All pain, no matter how intense, changes over time. Emotions shift, situations evolve, and the human spirit adapts. Unhappiness tends to arise when we believe that pain will last forever, or when we cling to how things used to be. Remembering that pain is temporary helps soften the fear around it. The mind tends to dramatize discomfort by imagining permanent suffering, But this is rarely true. Pain moves, unhappiness stays only when we hold on to it. Choosing not to turn pain into unhappiness is not about suppressing feelings or pretending to be unaffected. It is about meeting pain honestly, feeling it fully, and letting it go naturally. It is about distinguishing between what you feel and what you believe that feeling means. It is about recognizing that pain is part of being alive, but suffering over that pain is something we create through interpretation and attachment. This distinction gives you the power to experience life more freely, respond to challenges more wisely, and live with greater emotional resilience. Discipline is freedom, though at first this idea feels contradictory. When people hear the word discipline, they imagine restriction, control, rules, or the loss of personal comfort. But true discipline is not about limiting your life, it is about shaping it with intention. It is the quiet force that gives direction to your energy, structure to your potential, and stability to your inner world. Without discipline, a person becomes a prisoner of impulses, distractions, moods, and habits they cannot control. With discipline, those same forces fall into alignment, creating clarity, strength, and the freedom to choose actions that support long-term well-being instead of momentary pleasure. When the mind lacks discipline, it becomes reactive. It jumps from thought to thought, craving to craving, emotion to emotion. There is no anchor. You want to focus, but distractions pull you away. You want to grow, but comfort holds you back. You want peace, but your untrained mind keeps creating chaos. In this state, freedom is impossible, because the mind is not steady enough to follow through on what matters. You become trapped in cycles of procrastination, inconsistency, and regret. Discipline breaks these cycles by teaching the mind to obey intention rather than impulse. It creates the mental strength to stay with a task, follow a routine, or remain committed to a goal even when motivation fades. This ability is freedom, because it frees you from being dominated by your own fluctuations. Discipline also creates emotional freedom. Many people think emotions control them, but it is often the lack of discipline around emotions that creates suffering. Without emotional discipline, anger turns into destructive behavior, fear becomes avoidance, sadness becomes withdrawal, and excitement becomes impulsiveness. Emotions are natural, but our reactions to them determine whether they help us or hurt us. Discipline teaches you to pause, breathe, observe, and respond with awareness rather than reflex. This gives you the freedom to act from clarity instead of chaos. Emotional discipline does not suppress feelings. It allows you to experience them without being controlled by them. Even in everyday life, discipline builds freedom through consistency. When you consistently care for your body, through movement, rest, and nourishment, you gain physical freedom. Your energy increases, your strength grows, and your body supports your goals instead of limiting them. Without this discipline, the body becomes tired, weak, and burdened by habits that reduce your possibilities. Similarly, financial discipline creates freedom in practical life. Saving, budgeting, and making thoughtful choices may feel difficult in the moment, but they prevent stress, instability, and dependence. With this foundation, you gain the freedom to make decisions from your values rather than desperation. Perhaps the greatest freedom discipline brings is self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build inner confidence. The mind learns that you can rely on your own word. This quiet self-trust becomes a source of strength that cannot be taken away. When you trust yourself, you fear less, you hesitate less, you doubt less. You become free from the internal voice that questions your capabilities. Discipline creates this trust through repeated, intentional action, showing up even when it is uncomfortable, doing the work even when it is difficult, and choosing what aligns with your highest self rather than what feels easiest in the moment. Discipline also enhances clarity. When you create structure in your life, through routines, priorities, and mindful choices, you remove unnecessary noise and confusion. You free yourself from decision fatigue and the overwhelm that comes from living without direction. With discipline, each part of your life becomes more aligned. You know what matters, you know where you are going, and you know how to get there. This clarity is a form of freedom because it removes the uncertainty that drains energy and creates stress. Even creativity thrives under discipline. Without structure, creative ideas appear but rarely become reality. discipline gives form to imagination, turning inspiration into finished work. Many of the most creative individuals in history lived by strict routines, not to restrict themselves, but to create a stable environment where creative freedom could flourish without distraction. In every area of life, physical, mental, emotional, financial, and creative, discipline builds the foundation on which freedom stands. It is not the enemy of freedom, but its partner. Discipline is the strength to choose the long term over the short term, the meaningful over the easy, the intentional over the automatic. It is the doorway through which genuine freedom enters.